All right, we're on. Today is September 14th, 2009. My name is Tim Plass, and I am interviewing Ted Tedesco, former city manager of the city of Boulder. The interview is being filmed for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming back to Boulder. The first question is, where and when were you born?
I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, in July 13th, 1931. Long time ago. I'm a New Englander as such, but I left New England when I was about 18 years old and then never really moved back to live. So kept moving west. And
so tell me a little bit about growing up in Rhode Island. What was it like?
I was the oldest of 4 kids, and we were maybe what you would call a lower middle class economically. We didn't have much money, and things like if I was ever going to consider going to a college, my mother and father says we can't afford it, things like that.
Yeah.
And so you didn't try very hard. I became a jazz drummer, and at the age of 18, I'm in New York City playing.
Really?
Yeah, for about 4 or 5
Well, I was
years.
wondering, because I saw in your email that you sent me, it said Ted the Jazz Man.
Oh, yeah.
So is that where that comes from?
Yeah, well, I made a living that way, and then 4 or 5 years I did quite well, But then after that, I met some nice, solid kind of jazz guys who convinced me that there was no place to go in music, and this one fellow, piano player guy, said, I'm going to go back to college. And I said, yeah, that sounds interesting, And he said, well, let's go. And he says, if you want to do it, we'll go back. He was from Rhode Island, by the way.
Okay.
And so both of us quit what we were doing, and we took the train back up, and we went up to Brown University at the age of 24 or something like that. Walked into Brown and said, we want to go. What do we have to do? And the guy said, what kind of marks do you have? What were your high school? I said, oh, those were terrible. No, you don't want to look at those, but we're different now. No, I can't do it. So both of us went to prep school. So we said, what do you need? He said, well, you got to go to prep school. Convince us you want to do that. So we did. I did. And I didn't go to Brown, but I went to the University of Rhode Island and then went out to Michigan for graduate work and never looked back.
So where did you go to prep school then?
Worcester Academy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just for that 1 year. Continued to play drums at night, earn a living, and got good marks. And then was able to go through college doing quite well, really quite well. I was very active, class presidents and stuff like that.
That's an interesting story.
Well,
what was it like to be a jazz musician? Was it New York City?
Yeah.
What was that life like? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Just quickly. It was all music. I mean, you were consumed by music. It was the bebop era, and so everything was focused around Greenwich Village and creating music. This fast jazz and Dizzy Gillespie and all those guys were just people that you saw on the street and played things with. And then I got into big band jazz and a few big band orchestras and traveled around the country with a few of them, But the lifestyle was just horrible. I mean, you slept till 2 in the afternoon and kind of got up and messed around. And then you started looking forward to playing, and you played from 8 till 9 o'clock till midnight, then maybe go to another joint where there was a jazz group going on. Greenwich Village was very exciting, and stay up till 3, 4, 5 in the morning and go back to bed. And so it was who's playing great stuff, and you got to go listen to them, or you spend the afternoon with some other musicians creating rhythms and things. So it was a lot of creativity stuff. It was good. And a lot of drugs, I mean, that's always been part of the jazz scene. So there was a lot of stuff. And I was always frightened of drugs. I mean, really fearful, because I saw my buddies just, crawling into the corner and banging their heads against the wall. Yeah. And, heroin was the big bad stuff. A lot of marijuana around at
So
the time.
what years was this?
See, these were 1949, 50, 51, 52, 53.
So after the war.
Yeah, yeah. So, and so you find a nice guy who's equally repelled by, the music was great, but the lifestyle was terrible. He says you walk into a joint and everybody knows you're a hophead and a nut, that you play great music, but nobody wants to talk to you,
So did you play with any famous folks?
Yeah, I did. A lot of great jazz people. I ended up, I played with a guy named Buddy DeFranco, who was a great clarinetist. J.J. Johnson was a great trombonist. Lucky Thompson guy used to be with Duke Ellington, and finally ended up with Charlie Spivak's big band, and then eventually I played with Stan Kenton for a while, and which was really the most creative big band stuff around, And so anyway, yeah, did well, but it was always, oh boy, what do we do now? And that's what happened. Quite frankly, this guy, Joe, who later became a school principal, one of my best friends all my life, said to me, he said, some young kid's going to come along like you when you're 30 years old, probably married, got a kid or two, and he's going to play you off the stand, he's going to be great. And what are you going to do then?
Yeah.
So what do you mean, you don't think that far ahead, but Joe was one of those guys. And so he said, and both of us tried to get into TV at the time. It was just emerging. So we said, we'll get into that TV stuff, and see if music. Well, they didn't want to use live musicians very much. So that didn't turn out to be very good. And then said, let's go to college. Well, I didn't, and Joe said that. I said, okay, if you do, I will.
So how old were you when you went to college?
23.
So quite a bit older than the other kids there.
Yeah, I was. And and I go.
Maybe it let you focus more.
Yeah, no, I knew why I was there. Other kids were just kind of, that's what you do. But for me, it was very exciting,
Yeah.
And it was a choice to make, and it was like a big Y in the road, and you just go this way. And
Right.
But I continued to play music all during college to make money, and support myself, and ended up at Michigan and city management.
Yeah, you said earlier that you had kind of had this westward migration.
Yes.
So you ended up in Michigan. Is that where you did your graduate work? Or?
Yeah. No. Well, when my original intention when I went to college was I was interested in foreign service. So I thought that sounded romantic, exciting, and so I went through to my almost the beginning of my junior year, and one of my favorite professors, a fellow named John Stitley, was kind of my mentor about seeing what's going on, and so I went through the whole foreign service experience and application and discussions and things like that, and they said my first assignment, if and when I graduated, probably would be Ethiopia,
Wow.
And I said, oh man, wait a minute, I'm thinking about Paris, London, Rome. I told you how naive you are. He says, no, you might get there in 25 years, but the guys who've been in Ethiopia are now in Paris.
So that made you rethink maybe?
Yeah, so I went back to John and I said, John, Ethiopia, or someplace like that, He says, you should forget that whole idea and think about city management. I said, really? Tell me about it. So he did. Told me about it, and I thought, this sounds great. I like that hands-on stuff and all that. And so he began to guide me in, Syracuse and Michigan and Kansas and a few other universities were specializing in public administration. Mm-hmm. And so I said, that sounds great. I like that. I like the whole idea. So then that's how I ended up going to Michigan and getting a master's in public administration. And then followed a city management career after that for about 21 years. So
what year was it that you got your degree?
I got my master's in 58 and did an internship for about a year, and then I became city manager of Enfield, Connecticut. first city manager for this old mill town, which had a lot of corruption and going, and I took the job, quite frankly, because it was one of the toughest jobs around, and everybody said, don't do it, it's just hopeless, you know, it's just, God, it's just you got every problem in the book. So I thought, well, it's a good way to cut my teeth. I'll see if I'm good at it,
right.
You know? And so I took it, and 3 years, made it an all-America city, and
congratulations.
Had a complete flip-flop, you know, and then came to Boulder after that. So
what year did you arrive in Boulder?
67. And, yeah, 67, 73, I think it was, 74. And so I remember getting recruited, and 2 or 3 council members, Bob Connect, who was the mayor at the time, came to Connecticut and saw what I was doing, spent a couple of days there seeing whether or not what I had said was really true, you know, walking up and down the street talking to people. And I thought, and they had, at the time, City of Boulder had hired a guy named Bob something or other, and he was not an activist at all, and he had only been here about a year and a half. And what they said was, we think we got a lot of these problems, and we need somebody who's willing to tackle them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what did they think, that when they came to you, what did they say the problems were?
Well, it was essentially the city was still, if you can imagine, there were huge amounts of dirt roads here. 30th Street was a dirt road. Iris was a dirt road. 28th Street was 2 lanes and mostly dirt. I mean, it's hard to imagine.
Powell Rodeo Grounds, right?
Yeah,
Out there.
Yeah, rodeo grounds. And they had this emerging environmental group called Plan Boulder that was saying, you know, the city ought to be doing a better job with planning and stuff like that. And I saw this as a real kind of a quasi-laboratory, you know. And I said, well, if, you know, I'm an activist guy, I'm going to come in there and do a lot of stuff, and you people want to have it done. I said, that's great. So I thought that was a good place to go. And they literally said, come make things happen. Wow, great, you know. And it was the most beautiful city council I'd ever worked for in my life. I mean, it was so perfectly balanced to the community. Business guys, Ray Joyce, I can remember them all, you know, a guy named Les Newkirk who ran the theaters, and all the way from that to Howard Clemmy, who was a professor at law at the university, Janet Roberts, Bob Connect, who was a supreme mayor, great, you know, very visionary kind of guy. And there was none of this debating the roles. You know, we should do this and you should do that.
You mean the city manager versus the council?
Yeah, there was never a big discussion about that. You know, this was a team. This was a team in every respect. And I pushed and led and prodded, and they wanted a very visible manager. You know, they wanted you out there. And so we didn't have any of those kinds of discussions that went on later on. It was, look, get us going in doing some of these things. They had water problems, they had transportation problems, they had, you know, it was the old business community was sitting on its hands and not doing a whole lot but grumbling about everything, you know. The chamber used to be right across the street, you know. So you had a combination of infrastructure problems.
Right.
City wasn't keeping up with just about anything. And at the same time, you had this very activist group called Plan Boulder, among other groups, but essentially Plan Boulder, representing a group that was saying, there's a lot of development pressure coming and we're going to lose our environment, the mountain backdrop particularly, you know. And so I thought it was a perfect place for me to come, you know. You want somebody to move, I want to move, you know. I was.
So you were ready for the challenge?
Yeah, I was. I wasn't looking to be some kind of paper pusher, you know. I didn't want to go. The city managers can be kind of the people who kind of keep everything going, you know, but these people were great, and they were all my friends, you know, became my friends. And they wanted me to hire the best people I could, and boy, oh boy, it was, you know, it was very exciting. We were tossed out a couple of department heads who were just kind of sitting on their butt, old timers, you know. So we got them out of here, and this conference room used to be just exciting as hell, you know.
This particular room.
Well, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
it's probably been remodeled several times. But
That's
it's kind
right.
of a coming home, I guess,
Yeah.
in terms of being back in the municipal building.
Yeah.
So you described yourself as activist. What does that mean
Well-
to you? And what kind of philosophy did you have in terms of how you wanted to get things done?
Well, there are really kind of two, in my view anyway, as I've looked at city managers over the last 40, 50 years, I believe there generally are kind of two managers. There are some who are kind of bean counters and keep the books going and make sure everything's good and have a balanced budget and all of that. And then there are kind of more visionary people who say, look, these are urban affairs. These are cities that are changing, and it's more dangerous, but we want to get into community leadership. I mean, we're getting paid. So to sit back and go through some kind of ritualistic thing where, you know, it's maybe not a proper way to describe it, but, you know, you got city problems, and behind the scenes you try to get somebody to say, well, let's do something about bad libraries or circulation or open space or zoning and development. But there's that kind of group, managers, and some cities want that. And then there are some cities like a Boulder at the time that will say, look, bring us in some solutions and programs. We want to get on with it. And then once you do that, make sure you got good stuff and your ears are out there in the community, you know what, because you're trying to make the council look good also. I mean, you don't want to present them with a whole bunch of stuff that just fills up City Hall and everybody's screaming and hollering at everybody. So you got to be somewhat sensitive about what the community is ready to deal with. And so you got to kind of be smart enough and strategic enough to make sure that you don't really cause great divide between the community.
So when you're a new guy coming into town, how do you gauge that? How much the community is willing to do? What's going to put on the plate of the council? What's going to move forward? What's going to just hamstring them?
Well, you kind of get around the community a lot. When you're brand new, everybody wants to meet you. So if you have an open door policy, or you just say, look, I want to come out and talk to you. So you end up talking to all the clubs in town, you know. And you don't just make talks, you say, what do you think going on? You know, and you come back with a pretty composite view of how people feel about things, you know. So the thing is that you try to craft something that says, well, if they believe that, and you have to believe that what they say is true, let's do something about it. Let's not just sit around and hold sessions and think sessions and everything. Let's come out, you know. And then plus those things are usually pretty sensible to do anyway.
Yeah.
Like the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. Well, we're worried about development outside of the city of Boulder. Yeah, you're right. What are we going to do about it? Well, we really should be doing something, you know, and about building up on the Boulder Mountain and area. There were real proposals to put hotels up there and stuff like
Enchanted
that.
Mesa, was it?
Yeah, you know. So we said, well, we'll try to pass comprehensive scenic view ordinances to control. And my feeling was, hey, the hell with all that stuff. That ain't gonna work. We sit here and talk about and debate that for the next 2-3 years.
Right.
And in the meantime, there was a guy named Joe Ernie. He was ready to build a hotel up there, get a permit from the county, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And he helped me, actually, because when I said, somewhat later on, we want to buy all that Front Range area.
Yeah.
Our proposal was we're going to buy it. Forget this jazz about trying to control the development or the height or the bulk or preserve scenic views and all this other. I said, look, this is going to be bad. A hotel up there is going to be bad.
Right.
And that's only going to trigger the whole Front Range, you know. The county at the time was kind of a Neanderthal group of people. They were agricultural people and primarily agricultural people dominated by people outside of this city of Boulder. And so I went to see them all and finally convinced them, why do you want these problems? Oh yeah, we don't want all that stuff, you know. I said, okay, then I'll do them. They need our water and their sewer. I said, we'll take it over. So give me some extraterritorial agreements. So we signed little agreements like this, you know.
Yeah.
And I kind of took the problem off their shoulders. I didn't give a damn about good planning. It was, hey, he's going to take care of it.
So you had to frame the question.
Yeah, it was a different question
properly,
there.
right?
Yeah, do you believe in comprehensive planning? Are you kidding? You know. But if I went to a guy, an old guy from Netherlands, what was his name, Joe Smith or something, an old miner kind of guy. He was great. You know, I said, Joe, what do you want to deal with all these people for? They're going to come down and scream and all. He said, oh, yeah, get them off my back, you know. I don't want to deal with that stuff, you know. I says, okay, I got a plan. Turn it over to me. And guess
People
what?
said okay?
Yeah, and with the five of them, we drew a big line on a map. I mean, that became our planning area. So,
Oh, really?
yeah. Yeah, and then once we came out with the plan, and I would always go back to him and say, we're going to do this, is that okay with you guys? Yeah, just keep going.
So was this the era when the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan was being formulated, or was it already in existence? Or
No,
this
no, it didn't
So
exist.
this was really the first comprehensive planning effort in the city?
Yes. And
was that something that you initiated, or that how did that work?
it was, I think we initiated it, yeah, pretty much. We had to have control of the valley because development was going to take place.
Sure.
There was no question. And so we had to do that. And we began to know that with the blue line, if they wanted our water and sewer, we had them. You had to come to us.
Right.
So instead of sitting back, we said, this is what you can and cannot do. So we used the utilities as a way to control development. And so that became the key to how we manipulate and manage and use that extension of those utilities, in what areas, who would get it and who wouldn't get it. I mean, it was very, very Machiavellian in the sense of, we don't want development there, we're not ready. You know, we don't have the infrastructure and the fire and the libraries, so we don't want any of that stuff. And so we use that. And then along came, guess what, about the same time in parallel, the open space thing, the mountain backdrop problems, the pressure of development, and the Greenbelt program began to emerge in our own staff stuff. And so, cripes.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how the open space sales tax came about and your role in that, and just kind of what was it about Boulder that made it the place where this could happen? I know there are a lot of questions in there, I'm sorry, so go ahead and answer whatever you want.
That's okay. Well, it came because for example, I think it was within a couple of weeks after I got here, Plan Boulder held a Saturday kind of a think tank seminar up at NCAR about these issues, open space and planning and all of that. And I sat and listened to them. And it was more academic than it was practical. And I kept thinking, I knew enough about urban affairs to know that if you wanted to try to craft zoning and stuff like that, because zoning and land development was my prime experience back in Enfield, Connecticut. So I was fairly knowledgeable about that. I kept thinking all that meeting, this is never going to work. I mean, they're going to get away with it. Development interests are going to be able to exploit this thing. But they believed it, and they wanted to do it. And I came back from that meeting literally within 2-3 weeks of getting here saying, you know, we got to do something about that.
So that was 1967?
That was 1967. Okay. So I began to talk about Bob Connect and others on the council, and he said, oh yeah, you know, we're wringing our hands with this thing, we've been talking about it, et cetera, et cetera. So we talk among the staff. Well, what the hell's wrong with buying it? Just buy it. You know, then boy, what an answer, you know? So at the same time, the streets were all, it was just a mess. I mean, it was a cowtown atmosphere. You can't believe it that this was a university environment.
Interesting.
I mean, this place was Old West in many respects, you know? And so along comes that business group of guys, the chamber, who don't want any of this. We don't want any of this mountain scenic stuff, you know, fix the damn streets, you know, that kind of thing. So I'd come away from those meetings and we would discuss it among the thing. And that's where I came up with this idea, you know what we got to do? We got to craft a thing. Number one, we need money. Can't do it out of the budget.
Right.
Silly to think we could do that. So we'll craft a deal where if you vote against something, you vote against the one thing you really want.
The streets, right?
Yeah, so that's why I'm sure I came up with the idea of let's put the streets and the open space together. Wow, see. Well, we'll have two issues, one for streets, one for open space. I don't think it's going to work because we're going to fight like hell over what it is. But put it all in one package, you got to buy the whole package. So I sold that to the city council because there were business interests, let's say Ray Joyce on one end and Bob Connect on the other end and Janet Roberts. And I had to convince them that politically it stood a better chance. And I did. I convinced them. And I convinced the community that we had to do it. So there was a lot of pressure not to do it. Let's just take care of the streets first, you know? Then we'll come back for that. So no, we'll never get a chance to come back. If we do, it'll be another year. And taxpayers will say, man, we already passed that for streets. We don't want, you know? So I said, let's make it so that you hurt yourself when you go there. So you gotta have something. And there was a lot of debate about how much. I mean, there was a lot of debate about the fact that 60% went thoroughfares, only 35, 34, whatever it was, 60-30 or 70-30, 45, 60. Anyway, there was a lot of debate about how much was open space going to get versus how much the streets were going to get. But I thought, now I got them. I mean, now they're arguing about, we're arguing percentage, you know? Yeah, we got them. Yeah, they're not saying we don't do it. They're saying we should get more, you know, we should get more. So in hand and hard, you know.
So do you remember how the council voted on this when they decided to put it on the ballot?
It was unanimous.
Unanimous.
That's right. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was unanimous. And then we sold a campaign. I mean, the staff was very much involved. I can tell you and admit now, we screwed up all the lights in town, purposefully.
You screwed up all the lights in town.
Damn right. We would for
So how did you? What do you mean by that? How did you?
Well,
how
I
did you
can
do
tell you.
that? Okay.
The street light, let's say the stoplight at Baseline and what's the main street?
Broadway?
Huh?
Broadway? 28th Street?
Yeah, Broadway, let's say. So we had a little sign there saying, tired of waiting at the light? Vote for the Thoroughfare Greenbelt program, and this will be one of the projects we'll fix. So I had Director of Public Works go around and tweak all the street lights, and people are sitting there beeping the horn.
That's very...
Yeah, and I had Joe Ernie, the guy who wanted to build hotels, say that if this didn't pass and the city didn't want that piece of property, he was going to build that damn hotel up there. Scared the hell out of everybody. So we had, like, just think, top of Flagstaff, a 300-room hotel. Are you guys kidding? You know.
So he was saying that with your backing.
Oh yeah,
to gain support for this, because if we don't do this, then it will happen.
Oh yeah, and that was the first piece of property. So Joe was kind of using us to make sure that he ended up getting bought.
Yeah.
Because he knew he was going to fight like hell with the community. So he thought, well, maybe when it's all said and done, city wants it, so I'll make me a good guy. I'll be part of the deal, see? I told Joe personally, I said, look, yeah, I mean, if we pass this thing, well, I'm going to come and buy that piece of property from you. Well, how much are you going to pay us? I have no idea, but we're going to buy it. Oh, okay. Because nobody else is going to buy it. See? So we did things like that. I mean, we were very much activists about it. But you have to do that. Now, there were city managers to this day who would never do that in a million years. It's too dangerous. They say, well, you know, it's not my role and all of that. I always thought and feel to this day that, look, you're collecting taxpayers' money to help this community solve its problems. You're not a mechanism to bring options. You know, I see that all the time. Mm-hmm. Oh, I bring the council 6 options, and then we meet for 6 months over the options, and then, you know about what the hell works and doesn't work. And I think I'd rather go with those people and myself who have the satisfaction of saying, well, we took it on, we did something about it. And so that's the difference between an activist manager and he, and I think when we had that big change in '71 on the council, kind of an anti-government thing when Tim and government was a bad deal.
Penn Tate came on.
Penn Tate. Well, he was a black guy, and that was clearly in terms of a black. And so he was a, quote, outsider, although he was a very crafty, nice guy. He really was. I remember going to a national meeting with him of National League of Cities meeting in Indianapolis, both Tim and Penn. And Tim got stopped by the cops in Indianapolis. They wouldn't let him come. He called me up one time. He says, the cops are holding me. I said, well, you don't look like a city council member. There was strong-armed people in Indianapolis, And Penn Tate used to like to play the black guy, He would go to a meeting and say, I'm the token black city guy. And he'd get a great kick out of that big smile, beautiful teeth, He loved to play that thing.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So anyway, it was when Karen, what was her name? Karen, Tim,
Paget.
Karen
Paget.
Mm-hmm. It was very much an anti-government. All government was bad, Machiavellian, twisting, not working in the people's interest, that you began to have that. But leading up to '71, from '67 to '71, it was go, 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 Rec centers, libraries, water projects, just issue after issue, we just kept tossing them out there.
Yeah. So, in your role as an activist city manager, was there friction between you and the council, or between certain council members about how things were going to go? So,
no.
Interesting. Okay.
No. I tell you, when I mean that, I did that for 21 years, and I worked for hundreds of council members.
Uh-huh.
In that period of time in 3 different cities.
Sure.
There was never a debate about, I was always conscious of making sure that I was respectful of what was going on, and that I didn't get too far out. But the manager was a very visible individual here, and people wanted it. And I never had that experience where I was sensitive to it, but I wasn't ready to capitulate and say, oh golly, no, I don't really decide anything. The council decides anything. I did everything but vote. That's the way I saw it. I prepared and helped them, us. It was always look, it's us, I get paid, you people don't get paid. Let's make it happen. I don't give a damn who gets the credit, that kind of thing. So it was never that kind of thing. Later on, then you began to get into those esoteric arguments of roles and relationships, and the stronger mayor, because, we never had those kind of conversations with very, very capable people. They were not wimps.
So what do you think the difference was then, say, from when you first got here to the end of your tenure, when you described this kind of anti-government sentiment? Was that something in the national?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. If you remember the Vietnam War, and And all of that, kids were rioting against governments or government action, and kids had painted government as a Machiavellian organization doing things that people didn't know. And you remember this was a pretty hot area for student activism. And so you had to be a kind of a quasi-revolutionary to, you had to do your thing. And they were doing it in Ann Arbor, in Berkeley, and so we got to do it here in Boulder, So there was a lot of role-playing that used to go on about, as I said, fun riots. Well, we haven't, and the university was totally ill-prepared for it. I mean, I can tell you, starting from the very first confrontation, where, I'll tell you quickly.
Yeah, please, it's interesting.
CIA came here, and they were holding recruitments. Kids went crazy. It was anti-CIA kids, and there must have been a few thousand kids chanting outside, et cetera, against this recruitment. And so the university, so what did the kids do? They went over to Regent Hall, and they sat down in the foyer down there playing guitars, smoking joints, and they called me up. Say, you got to come up here, it's a police problem, et cetera, et cetera. So I went up with Don Bendel, the chief of police. Great guy. Homegrown guy, hayseed kind of a guy, and I always felt that I didn't leave it to the cops. I had learned that from other cities, that when there were riots going on in other places. So I got on a plane one time and visited a couple of them. I said, what went wrong? We let the cops handle it. I said, well, control the sheriff, control the state police. Don't let them take over, you make the decisions, So I came back and I told our own police force, if we ever had student problems, and we were going to have it, because SDS and people used to meet up at the university and say, fuck, and come in there and arrest this kid, what the hell is this, And I always thought it from the point of view of, I can't do it. I mean, these kids have got the numbers, I don't have enough cops to arrest these kids. And so how do we keep everybody cool? There's just the practical limits of trying to be. But the university at that time, with that incident, said, you got to get these kids out of here. So Fred Thiem was the president, and Fred is not in town. He's flying back. So a guy named, maybe number 2 guy named Ted something or other, nice guy. He said, I just talked to Fred Thiem in Chicago, and he says, let the kids stay here till closing hours of Regent Hall, 5 o'clock. So, okay. So I'm sitting around, 5 o'clock comes, a couple of Jim Corbridge and some other guys who used to be up there. He says, you got to be out of here at 5 o'clock, and I thought to myself, these kids are going to wait till 5 o'clock, and then see what happens.
A challenge.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was crazy. And so I'm sitting there, and then the district attorney, Stan Johnson was the district attorney. It's the law and order, see. Law, it's what you do, see. And so Don and I are sitting kind of like over here, just listening to all this stuff going on. And so finally he says, 5 o'clock's here. He says, let's get these kids out of here. So they go down there, and now it's closing hours. You must leave the building, et cetera, et cetera. The kid goes, they're playing. They're having a ball, So we're up on the 3rd or 4th floor, looking down at maybe 1,000 kids jammed in there, stinking. There's grass being smoked all over the place. Right. And look at me, and they said, let's move these kids out of here. I said, I'm not moving them out. What? I said, I'm not moving them out. They're not doing anything. What the hell's the difference if they're not out of here by 5 o'clock? As far as I'm concerned, they haven't done anything that I'm supposed to move them out on.
Right.
Well, you gotta, I said, look, here's what's going to happen. We're going to pick up 2 kids. I'm going to bring in 2 cops, or 10 cops. We're going to lose, and each kid is going to lay on the floor, and we've got to carry them outside. So after we carry him outside of the building, his buddies are going to open the window, he's going to come back in. Or, well, we'll arrest him and book him, says Stan. So we're going to bring him down to the thing, book him, fingerprint him. First thing he's going to do is run back up to Region Hall, see if his buddies are still there, and we're going to arrest him again. I said, you see what's happening here? It's just a stupid damn exercise. You can't do it, you know, not going to do it. So Ted Manning, that's the guy, number 2 guy at the university. He said, well, this is going to be an interesting thing because when the city council knows that you will not help the university enforce the law. I said, oh, Ted, don't give me that bullshit, you know. You know, he called up the governor.
Really?
Governor John Love. So he says, the governor's coming up here, going to be here at 8 o'clock. Really? Yeah. Okay. Well, you don't want to enforce the law, get these kids out of the building. Well, okay. So I tell the chief, call up the state cops and tell them that we want to meet with them outside of the campus. Really? Well, I said, just go do it. You know. Make a long story short, I meet the governor in his chauffeur-driven car about at Baseline and 28th Street. What's going on? John was a handsome, beautiful guy, you know. I said, you got about 700 to 1,000 kids living there, and they're not doing a hell of a lot of things. I mean, it's just, now it's about 8:30 at night. It's just, but, you know, quite frankly, what the hell are we supposed to do? So John says, maybe I'll go talk to them. It's the governor. I said, Governor, you got cameras, you got everything. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get down there, and they say, the governor, they're going to put a show on for you. They're going to throw water at you. They're going to say every foul language word. And I said, you're going to be on TV. What the hell are you going to do when you do that? What are you going to do? Argue with some 18-year-old kid, you know, et cetera, et cetera? It's going to be kind of stupid, quite frankly, you know. He goes, let me know if you need any help. Gets in the car and goes back to Denver.
Interesting.
Yeah. Let me know. And at about 1 o'clock in the morning, the kids got tired and left. So the university just, I mean, I was trying to be practical. I had no great philosophical, they have a right to protest and all of that. I was trying to say, how the hell do we stop, not get people to fight like crazy, you know? And so that, and the university, that was the first on-campus event I remember quite well. Then we had some off-campus stuff where the Hill got burned, and those were really serious things. I mean, Molotov cocktails and a lot of tear gas. I was a big user. I love tear gas. You know, it doesn't. A Saturday night when the Hill was burning, in the camera stores and the Colorado bookstore, I mean, they set fire to stuff. You know, it was not fun. Chief and I are driving around. And Bob Connect, I said, God, it's the mayor, you know? So he comes up to me at the car, and we stopped. It's an unmarked car, by the way, because we walk around with a marked car. These kids would have taken a beat on us. So I used to make sure the cops looked like Levi's and windbreakers. I said, you walk in there, they're you're going to see you, and they see a cop, they're going to plug a cop, see?
Right.
So Bob comes up to the window and his eyes are all red. And he says, look, this is terrible. I said, it's bad. You know, it really is bad. Well, what the hell are you, I mean, look, this is my city. This is burning and everything. And I said, I know, Bob. It's a really bad scene. What do you want me to do? I mean, what do you want me to do? Yeah, you know, bring in 1,000 people and start shooting everybody and pushing, you know, it's already happened, you know, there's nothing you can do. So we stuck him in the back of the car, and he was the most depressed, unhappy man, because he saw up front. It's a pretty ugly scene.
Yeah.
And, you know, the next day, these kids confronted us in the Hill, and I negotiated to, but I had a thing called, which saved our bacon, called the Urban Core. And John Lindsay in New York City gave me the idea for it. And it was, get a whole bunch of kids and pay them $10 to be a core of people about the city, and I had a black student, well, not a black student, just an activist, hippie kid named Jim Grayer, big, tall, black, and he headed up my group called the Urban Core, and he used to infiltrate all of these hippie gangs and all of that other stuff. So I always knew what was going on because Jim was radioing back. You know, I just left his house and this is where they're making the Molotov cocktails, you know. So I can walk
So you had
around.
the mole.
Yeah, he was a mole and he had 2-3 dozen other kids, you know. And so when some guy is saying, okay, let's attack, one of my own guys would say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, you know. You know, and so it was, you used every kind of thing in the book to keep people from killing each other. I mean, there were people who wanted to just shoot at it, you know, cops.
And what were they so mad at?
They were mad at government. They were mad at, you know, the Hill was our area. You know, a lot of hippies would park and take leaks in front of businesses, and it was a bad scene. I mean, a businessman would call us up and say, look, I got 6 kids standing in my doorway, and no customers will come. What are you going to do about it? Well, it's a public sidewalk. What do you do about it? Okay, guys, move along, do this. But, you know, you can't do that 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And so the kids began to feel that this was for their area. You know, and there were some businesses. Tim was running a bookstore, and he's promoting all this revolutionary stuff, you know. That's how I got to know Tim. He was long hair. He's out there saying they got a right to be here, and then you got the business guys who were screaming because no customers would go on the area. It was a pretty bad area. I mean, it was ugly, and kids were not behaving like nice protesting kids. They were, you know, being ugly and bad and defecating and pissing on the windows and things like that. You know, it's just a bad scene. So it was kids. I mean, kids were doing this all over the country, you know. The question, how do you deal with that? And so, like, I remember a very serious meeting where 200-300 business people came down here screaming at the council, you know. And I told the council beforehand, I said, I'll take the heat, you know, blame me, because you need a vent, you know. And we need more police enforcement. We want, the police are not beating these kids up, they're jailing them, do something, you know, et cetera, screaming, hollering. And Bob would say, well, he's our director of public safety, and we're going to have a serious talk with him, but thank you, you know. And you knew everybody pretty much. And it's a serious issue, but there are limits to what the government can do. Everybody thinks the government can just about do anything, pass any law, any ordinance, do what it is. Well, when it comes to individual behavior, there's very little you can do in public sidewalks. So you can move kids around, keep them busy, keep them active. I mean, when we had riots, my whole philosophy was just tire them out. They'd sit in an intersection, you know, block the intersection. Cops move in, move them out, and then they move to another intersection. Move out, just keep moving them around. And eventually they just get tired, you know. And but if you confronted them, then you had a real serious problem. And I think we got through that whole period of 4 or 5 quite serious riots by simply not coming to the point where, okay, you know, knock the chip off my shoulder, all hell is going to break loose. And I controlled the sheriff and the cops. And I talked to our own police officers and said, look, guys, I'm on the line, I'll do it, I'll take the responsibility, I won't transfer it over to you, so you have to decide where you're going to pull a trigger, you know. Mm-hmm. And so we never had any live ammunition, speak of, except maybe some lieutenants or sergeants might have, but the poor patrolmen,
What did they have?
Empty guns.
They had empty guns.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Was there any protest about that from the patrolmen?
No, they really didn't. Because we spent a lot of time talking to them, you know. Bad scene, I know. But Think about it. Pull a trigger, you put a bullet through this kid's head. You know, what the hell are we going to do? Oh, Christ will hand. Memorial services for the till you can't believe it. And what are you going to do? You know, a stupid kid is in there taunting you. You know, sticking a flower in the rifle.
Right.
What are you going to do? Kill him?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, you want to kill him? So you take the pressure off him and you say, "That's my decision. I'll tell you." And I think it worked. I have to tell you, I think it worked. You know. But every time there was one, you knew you were in for 3, 4, 5 days of just terrible. People screaming, what's happening to our community? Why are they here? You know, I said, it's a nice place. That's why do all these hippies come here, you know, going east and west? And so I remember one time at a council meeting saying, okay, I'm on the road, I'm a hippie kid, I got a girlfriend, half a dozen buddies, you know, and we're going west. Where do you stop? Cody, Wyoming? No. Colorado Springs? You go to Boulder, right? That's why they're here, you know? And they'd stay for a while, and there'd be people in the community that wanted to, you know, the big controversy was, do we build toilets for them in Central Park? Because they were defecating all over the place. It was an ugly scene. Central Park was ugly, ugly, ugly bad.
Can you describe it a little bit?
Yeah, it was very ugly. There would be hundreds and hundreds of kids in Central Park, and it's a public park. And then, so because the kids were defecating, we said, well, okay, we'll build some johns, public johns, and then they can use them.
Right.
So the big debate was, why the hell are you doing that? I mean, all you're doing now is making it like almost they could stay there all day and all night, and sleep, you know, can they sleep in the park? Well, can you close the park down? Not sure. And so there was a minister, Jim McLean, I think his name was. He was all for the kids. So I got up and I thought, hey, Jim, you're a real funny guy, you know, it's all great, you know, et cetera. So I announced, I said, we're going to put out pamphlets that if you really want to sleep overnight, you can sleep in Jim's church. Yeah, well, old Jim, you know. It was okay to get up in front and be popular, but the minute I turned the church on him, he said, that's a crummy, dirty, underhanded thing to do. I said, don't give me that white-collar jazz, Jim. You know, you're playing it both ways, you know. You get up in front of 500 kids and they cheer you on because you tell them this city ought to be doing this and that. I said, well, I tell you what, the hell with that. But that was a big controversy, and so I started watering Central Park a lot. I watered the hell out of Central Park. I literally turned it into a mud hut. And so the kids are sitting in all this mud all the time, see? Just water the hell.
Was that effective?
Damn right it was effective. It was an ugly place. But I wouldn't tell anybody. I wouldn't say, well, guess what we got to do. I said, get the guy, come over here. Water that thing every 2 hours, so the sprinklers would go on, and you know, kids would get all wet and get mad and roll up their bags, and you know, I mean, but you know, it was intercourse. You could see the kids just screwing on the creek bank. I mean, it was a bad scene. You know, it was going on all over the country, but and there were a lot of people who played on these young kids, older guys in their late 20s and 30s were using these young 16, 15, and 17, 18-year-old girls as sex toys. I mean, there was a lot of drugs, a lot of stuff, a lot of ugly stuff was going on. Well, how do you really enforce that? How do you really? So you saw both sides. You saw kids just lifestyle, you know.
Yeah.
You had people there was one guy who was a particularly active organizer up at the university, and I called him up. I called his father up, who was a university official someplace back east, and he says, hey, just make sure he doesn't come here. I said, geez, I was calling you up to say, can you do something with this kid of yours? He says, I don't want to deal with him, just keep him over there, you know. So it was a fun time. So, you know, there was a cartoon that one of my staff people made. It was like the proverbial
with one hand, you're kind of building the community, see, during the day. And occasionally, every, whatever, 4 or 5 times a year, we're fighting like mad, you know. So you had 2 hands. One was a sword, fighting like mad, and the other one was you're trying to put comprehensive planning together in the middle of it, you know. It was a pretty wild time.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty wild time. But, and it was a magnificent community. It was a magnificent community. So, anyway, kind of got off the beaten path.
Oh, no, it was great. Really interesting to hear those things for sure. I should actually probably stop right now and change the tape because we've talked for almost an hour now.
Yeah.
This is part 2 of our discussion with Ted Tedesco, former city manager for the city of Boulder, Colorado. So we had just finished talking a bit about the hippie issues and some riots, and I thought maybe we could switch gears a little bit and talk about Boulder being a dry city. I know it's hard to believe, but until the late 60s, Boulder was dry. So can you talk a little bit about how that changed and what the dynamics were?
Well, they had a few elections before that to try to get rid of this silliness of having these county islands all over the place where you could have a drink and not have a drink. And they'd had a few elections and went down. And it used to be the church group and the liquor industry used to get together to defeat them. But when I got here, Bob Connect, we talked about it, but it was part of a downtown. What are we going to do about the downtown in general? But it was fairly obvious that downtowns would be more interesting if you could have restaurants and places where people could drink and stuff like that. So we put it in the context of it's part of a downtown revitalization effort, that restaurants, we gave the image of, it wasn't a question of drink or not drink. We redid the issue so that it became part of it's the way to develop it. It's the way to develop the community. So we kept promoting this idea that it was part of redevelopment of the downtown area, and the downtown area without restaurants and places like that where you could socialize wouldn't make any sense. You can't have just a whole bunch of little stores, you know, kind of thing. And I think a key guy was a guy named John Cohagen, who owned one of the islands out there between 28th and 24th Street, where McGuckin's Hardware is and all of that. John owned all of that. And he was kind of a cantankerous old guy. Nobody had ever really gone to him. So he said, let's go get John to get on board with this thing, because he had always fought it. He wanted the independence and the freedom to the old lamplighter. Was one of his places that he rented out to, and he didn't want anybody to him. But we, you know, we schmoozed the heck out of him. Connection was good at that, and brought him in, and made him kind of a respectable guy, in a sense. And he began to say, okay, what is it you want to have done out at that property? Instead of the city was always fighting him, so we kind of co-opted him, and with his support and some others, it kind of changed the atmosphere. The churches was just as active against the drinking thing, but it was beginning to, you had to be against not just drinking, but you had to be against this downtown development more than you.
So you framed it as kind of an economic development tool.
Yeah, we changed the message, you know. Before it was drink, dry, no dry. Well, you know, what are you going to have? It's the wrong question. So, and it won. Yeah, but it was simply part of why do we care? You know, well, it was everything from it doesn't make sense to have these islands. Didn't make sense to have the county presumably playing some role in these spots all over the community. It was, you know, it was kind of, and I did a lot, and the city council didn't. But I did a lot of schmoozing of the county supervisors. I found that they were pretty good bunch of people that didn't give a damn about the city, but that was good. I didn't want them to give a damn about the city. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, look, you got the whole county to deal with. Great, you know.
So you're always
And that's
thinking
what
of the
happened.
angles on.
Well, it's a strategic thing, you know. I mean, I've used that strategy all my life. You know, it depends on what you ask and how you ask and whatever it is. So, I mean, you know, when I came back to the university as vice chancellor, I mean, I was here 1 week, you know. I said, you got to do something about parking. You know, everybody's parking lots are terrible and they're unsafe and they're all. So I said, you're kidding me. Oh yeah, we haven't been able to figure this out. See, so Russ Nelson was the chancellor. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guy. Still talk to him. And I came back about a week later. I said, I got a plan. We're going to pave all the parking lots, put lights in them. And he says, what are you talking about? I said, he says, you know, you're going to be crazy. I said, look, that's the way we're going to solve the problem, you know. I said, but we're going to increase parking by $2. Oh, God. So I went to see all the deans, you know. It says, $2, you know, it takes. And of course, the deans, half of them said, do I get to park near the building? Yeah, we probably can have a dean slot, you know. Oh, well, that's good, you know. So, okay, you handle your faculty, you know, don't get them all upset about stuff like that. And I borrowed the money from Leo Hill, who used to run the First Boulder Bank here, and found out he could lend me the money, which I then spent, and I paid him back, you know, just shifting money around. And guess what? I was a local hero, you know. I paved all the lots. They were nice. And
So what year was that, Ted?
let's see, 78.
So you were back as vice.
I came back as vice chancellor
And how long were you in that role?
from 78 to 85.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, it was strategic. It was always it isn't to be a wise guy about it. I don't mean in that sense.
Right.
But you have to be able to frame the issue in a way that people can relate to it in some way, you know. And I find so many times that, what is it we're really talking about here? What is it you really want to do? You know, what is it you want? What's the problem? Let's talk about that. You know, it's just, you know. Anyway, that was the drinking thing, but it was another victory. You know, it was another thing that people were beginning to get worked up that the community could do things. You know, and we had new leadership. We had, as I say, we had a great city council, the best I've ever worked for.
Ever?
Best, yeah, no question. I could give you every name that was here, you know.
Well, I'll take that as an opportunity then to, maybe not every name, but,
Oh yeah.
but in terms of like, memorable characters that you worked with on the council or on the staff or whatever, I mean, pick out a few and highlight them for us.
Well, Bob Connect, of course, as the mayor. Janet Roberts, for sure. Howard Clement, professor of law. A guy named Mike Trent, who was a banker in town, who unfortunately got killed. He used to dig for artifacts and stuff like this. And one Saturday morning, it caved in on him. Cried my eyes out. He died.
Doing excavations?
Yeah, just there used to be places where the old miners used to throw all their stuff, and he was digging, and not deep, 4 or 5 feet deep, you know. Ray Joyce was a great guy, a doubter, would always you know, give you the business approach, but wanted to see things happen. A guy named he used to run Ball Brothers Research. Never did a lot of work, but he was quick, you know. He'd open up his packet at the night of the meeting. You already knew what the hell he was doing. He hadn't gotten around to reading the material, you know, things like that. John Beekner. John was and John and I went to Michigan together.
Oh, really?
Way back, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there were those kinds of people on the council. That's a wonderful council. And we're all in agreement about the kinds of things we wanted to do. They just needed somebody to pull it together, you know? Why don't we do this? Yeah, well, okay, they're interested. Let's come back with 3 or 4 ideas on how to do it. But once we locked in, I used to sell programs to them. Said, let's do it. Let's go ahead. And they were willing to do it. There were no scaredy cats on it. You know, like, oh my goodness sakes, we got to go have 35 neighborhood meetings, et cetera, you know, that kind of thing. Are we sure? Or, you know, it wasn't. Our job was to do the best we could and think about it and then say, look, we're going to make decisions.
So were you talking to them behind the scenes?
Oh, all
at
the
a
time.
meeting, so you
Yes.
would call up Janet and say, Janet, hey, we've got this thing going on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Call the care and feeding of city council members. You know, I mean, really. I mean, when I went to San Jose, which after Boulder, which was a city of 500,000 people, I spent 60–70% of my time with the city council and the mayor. Managing was almost secondary, you know. Getting the votes, lining them up, encouraging them, finding what they were ready to do became part of the job.
Interesting.
So I could be, you know, managing like heck, and I would hire directors who could manage well, so I didn't have to be looking over their shoulder all day long. And then I could then deal with the political side of lining up the votes in San Jose.
Well, it sounds like that's really what you like to do the best, is to work. I mean,
yeah, I deliver the
be
goods.
An activist.
Yeah, I start them off. I do this, and I've been part of the formulation. Now I want to see the darn thing go. I don't want to just toss it out there and say, well, gee whiz, we won one, and you know, look, if we really believe that this is something that the community needs, and it's a good thing, and we've got solutions, it's our job to carry through. You know, that's not common nowadays. I know it isn't. I mean, I see the difference, and so I see cities floundering all over the place. You know, you asked me about regrets.
Yeah. Any regrets from your time ago? Wish you'd done it. Wish you hadn't done it.
What we should have done on the downtown mall was force a bigger. See, at one point it was a 9-block super block, 9 blocks, and we were going to divert Broadway. Broadway was going to come down from the university, go over to whatever street it was, 3 blocks over.
To the east?
Yeah, go to the east, go by the downtown, then weave back in north of the downtown area. Mm-hmm. And it was going to come from the north and sweep out. So we would have this 9-block super block area, mm-hmm. it was called. Mm-hmm. And we were going to put water through the whole thing and all of the amenities, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so we started with what is now the mall, but we never locked it in. So when this group and myself and others, I think, left, I think they chickened out. I mean, if the mall is successful, just imagine it as a truly magnificent urban center, you know? And the regret is that where we had a great big plan for a performance, City Hall performance, we had a national competition, architectural competition here, and the people voted it down. It was going to be along Boulder Creek, and it was going to be part of the beautiful arts and culture and performance centers and everything else. Well, we lost that one. People, you know, it was a very exciting concept.
Where is that going to be near 14th?
It was going to be from 14th, incorporate Central Park, incorporate this area all the way to the library.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it was magnificent. National architectural competition, which...
what happened to that? Why didn't it pass?
I don't know. I think people just thought it was frivolous or something. I'm not sure, you know. Marcelie will tell you about it.
I'm sure she will.
Yeah, I mean, she was big in it,
yeah.
And I worked very hard for that. So when I walk along the mall now, I can't walk the mall without saying, this is great, but it could have been.
Even more.
Could have been even greater. And just think if just 2 blocks over here we'd had this wonderful center, art, music, performances, whatever, you know. It would have been a national conference center where you can come and enjoy the downtown area better than, the downtown is a shopping, eating place to congregate. But you need more than that at night. You need theater, you need display.
More than a bank on every corner.
Museums. Yeah, you need all of those things to make it. And that's the big regret. We should have we thought that by doing it, it's going to be a natural. People will just keep extending it another block. It's working, we're proving that it can work and everything else. Well, my regret is that we didn't lock it in, and the council came along and began to divert the money into other areas and interests. And so during the time from roughly Tim Fuller on, 71, 72, 73, just let it go. And they sat there and didn't do a damn thing for a long time. Long time, I thought, what a waste. Look what happened, So I was too trustful of the future. I thought it was such a natural, Yeah. Why would you stop, And even yesterday, when I walked the mall and went beyond the pedestrian area, I look at all those buildings that I recognize, they've been renovated, and I thought, it's diminishing. And eventually, in the ambiance, as you walk, when the cars are now over there, and it's now just a shopping area, restaurants east, let's say, of the mall. It's just a shopping area. And so it doesn't have the pedestrian look and the aggregation feeling, and people come and meet and have an ice cream and sit under the trees, etc. It's just a shopping area. So I would think, geez, 40 years later, and it's just a shopping area. Not a hell of a big record. Then when I came back in 78 with the university, I really became concerned, and we developed a redevelopment agency, and I was on that because I wanted to do something with Crossroads, to tie in the downtown with Crossroads. Thought Crossroads was has-been area, And I thought, I had 2 ideas, which never came, and that's a real regret. I thought, first of all, we ought to tie the 2 together with some kind of shuttle bus system. So you could jump on a bus and end up at shopping and then go back downtown, pick up your car, or go out and have so there ought to be some kind of free transportation system, just a thing like that. And some kind of, and my other regret was that it was clear to me that and I thought the redevelopment agency should sponsor the buses, and tie in the university, have a triangle thing. University, downtown, Crossroads. Circulate. Get people there. You just jump on a bus and you're there. You're talking, and so you don't have to pick up your car and move out there. So we didn't do that. Then I came up with the idea of, why don't we make Crossroads Central Park? Wouldn't that be great? The hell with it, whether we care whether there's a shopping center out there. Wouldn't that be great to make Crossroads our Central Park? Buy the damn thing. Take it off their hands. It's a marginal thing at best. And turn it into a park. Wow, what a killer, huh? That'd be great.
It was a real showpiece.
Oh, and the city could do it. Really could, I mean, I know how they could do it, using redevelopment and tax increment bonding, and you could acquire it, and then gradually improve it, and just take those damn buildings down and get rid of them. Just more open space. Think of that. I mean, think of the idea of Central Park in New York City.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, and you just visualize what that could be. It's be unbelievable, You know?
An idea for the future, maybe.
Yeah.
Still.
So that's a regret. Anyway, nothing much else.
Well, that's good. So how did you decide that it was time to move on from Boulder?
Well, first of all, I moved on because the city council had changed so much that we started to hold these debates about the role of the manager and democracy and the people have to listen, and we began to have these philosophical discussions. Tim and Karen and others were kind of anti-City Hall. They got elected on the basis that they were anti-City Hall. No question about it, in my mind. And so then they started acting that way, you know? Now it was adversarial. Yeah, you say that's what it is, but how do we really know? What do you really got in the back of your mind? I don't have anything in the back of my mind, you know? And so I said, you know, this is a marriage that ain't gonna work. I don't want to work in this kind of environment. I really don't. And you need somebody else. And so I said, you know, maybe there's a time when, if that's the way you want the government to be, I'm the wrong guy for it. And so I thought, eventually they'd probably fire me. We may maybe get enough votes, but I didn't want to go through that exercise. You know, you don't want me fine, bing, out of here. It's not enough. I don't want to work at a job so much that I'm going to do whatever I can and sacrifice the way I am.
Sure.
I was hired to do a certain thing in a certain way, and I'm willing to adjust and modify, but I ain't about to say that everything we did up to this point has been terrible and ugly and anti-student and anti-freedom. And I mean, it just got to be a lot of bullshit stuff, you know? So I thought it was time to move on. And I wanted to manage a big city. I wanted to see if I could take and manage a city. And San Jose was a big, big city with a lot of urban problems. Planning problems, primarily. And I'm a good land planner guy. I know how to put planning together and stuff like that. And it wasn't a down and out city, so I moved there. And I think everybody was relieved. I mean, you know, so that's, but I wouldn't have moved. I would have stayed here a few more years. Eventually I would have left to manage Dallas or Kansas City or someplace like that. It was just in my nature to want to see if you could do that. Because then you do burn the people out. You tire them out, you know what I mean? Yeah, you do. There's a time when they need to just take a breath. And so you can't come down here every Monday morning, or guess what? We're going to take on, you know. So I understand that. And but it was clearly, I don't know who the others were. Penn Tate was part of it, and he'd come to me on the side and said, look, we just got to play at that. Don't worry about this, you know. They're just doing their thing, you know, and he'd giggle and laugh. And I said, this, you know, look, this is a great community. I'm not going to play a stupid-ass game by saying government is a badass thing and play this anti-Nixon role and the national role. I mean, come on, this is all show. You know, it's all show. These people want the same thing everybody else does, you know. Karen used to come here 3 days after delivering a baby and breastfeeding her child up on the diet. You know what I mean? It's show. It's just show. And I thought, tough. And I don't think it's been better overall. I don't think the elevating the image of the mayor so that the mayor is now responsible, I don't think it's helped anything. What has it really done? What has it really changed? I have found in my experiences, once you begin to do that, the fights really take place between the council and the mayor over power. Really. That's, I mean, if anybody has to give up any power, it isn't the manager as such. The manager has to play a kind of a role, looking like he's optional, you know. But the mayor is the one that, if the mayor wants more authority, she or he can only get it from the city council. And so I have found in San Jose, when there was a good strong mayor, the council was the one that was fighting all the time with the mayor as to what he or she could do. And you would sit back and watch this useless, energy-consuming thing about backfighting and all of that, because, you know, and I thought, how does this help in the city? I mean, how does poor citizens come before us with problems, and then all this ballroom dancing is going around as to who puts up the issue and who votes about this and who votes about that. So after 7 or 8 years of that, I just got disillusioned with the process, you know. And city council members became full-time.
Is this in San Jose now you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Full-time. I'm going to spend all my time on urban affairs. Guess what happens? Suddenly they need offices. Suddenly they want staff. They want budget analysts. They want secretarial help. They want to have offices located throughout the community so they can relate to that. So that when an issue comes up, now they want to sit down and talk to the chief of police, and chief of police gives them 4 or 5 things to keep them happy in what I call the proverbial municipal sandbox. We kind of play around, you know, and things like that, and then, you know, it's just, and I think of the poor taxpayer who's got a problem. What does he or she know about all this stuff that goes on, this playing around with going through the motions, you know? I think people expect government to be effective, to make that there are legitimate issues, and to do something about it. People don't care about what happens day in and day out down at City Hall. I mean, it's an exercise for political people who like that and interest in it. But this transfer of role-playing that goes on, and it's been, I mean, I was at American Airlines for a long time and oversaw all the airports all over the world, and so I'd see governments operate airports, but I'd see governments operating as such, and it just became wasteful. Wasteful in energy, was incredible. We had a strong planning department. It was great, you know, great groups. They were excited about doing things, and as they would say, I remember John Buechner at the university, and a guy named Larry Brown and others would say, "Well, you come in and you say, look, here, we're going to do it." You know, ooh, all of a sudden, the talking got done. Today we're going to decide it, you know? And that got to be very exciting.
Yeah,
people,
absolutely.
you know, gee. You know, so it was a very wonderful model of what I thought was the right balance between professionalism and citizen involvement. And each respected each one. It wasn't, I'm king of the hill, therefore you're not.
Yeah.
What does that accomplish? It doesn't accomplish a hell of a lot.
Well, I think I'm at the end of my questions. I want to give you a chance to say anything else that you'd like to before we finish up with
Well, number one, I think the oral history thing is a magnificent idea. And things do change. I understand that. And sometimes there's a good match between a city manager and a community. And I always felt that this was, of the 3 cities I managed, Enfield, Connecticut, Boulder, and San Jose, this was for me the Renaissance time. We did things that were exciting, the city wanted it, and I felt good about it. And when I left, I cried my eyes out. I was just, yeah, it's too bad. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ted.